We just go
slides
ahead and
whenever.
get started. Yeah, that'd be
Sounds good.
helpful. All right, cool. All right, great. Well, first of all, everybody, I just want to thank everybody for taking time out of their day today to join us for our Living Labs People to First Places webinar. So just a little bit about who we are. We're the Institute for Public Administration, and what we do here is we help partners address policy, planning, and management through research, training, and technical assistance. So the program that you're going to hear about today is just another one of those arms, right? The Living Labs program, it's sort of like a research technical assistance program that is run here through the university in cooperation with DelDOT, and we look forward to telling you about it. So just a couple housekeeping measures for everyone. The webinar is being recorded. We're going to post it to our website. So anyone who wasn't able to join us here today will be able to have access to that information. We'll also send it out to you all at the end with some valuable links that we're going to want you to have at the end, which can kind of like give you some information about next steps. Also, we're going to have questions at the end. We want to make sure that we get through all the information. However, if you don't want to forget your question, feel free to drop it in the chat just as we're going along, and we'll monitor those and circle back to them. And then the last thing is this webinar is scheduled for 1 hour. However, we can go over, but we just want to make sure that we respect everyone's time and stick to our information, that we want to make sure that we get to you guys within the hour. If questions run over, certainly I'm not going to stop like a good flow if we're kind of like really digging in. So with that, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Alex McClellan, who is going to run us through the agenda and get us started.
Hi, everyone. Matt, are you sharing your screen? Because I can't see the presentation right now.
Oh, really? Hold on. I thought it was. Zoom? Share? Screen. Hold on 1 second, Alex. So you couldn't see the screen in the beginning of all of that?
I don't know if it was just me, but I could not. Okay, yeah, no one.
No. Well, it's okay. It was just the intro screen anyway.
Yeah,
So
yeah, no worries.
let me just get us back here. So now I'm going to share.
Perfect.
Everyone see that?
Yes.
All right, my apologies.
Yep, no worries. Okay, so I'm just going to hop right into the agenda then. So before we get started, I wanted to give everyone a quick overview of what we'll be covering today. So we'll begin with an introduction of who we are and what do we do, to give you guys a sense of the partners involved in this collaboration and the type of work we focus on, as well as next we'll go into what a pop-up demonstration is and how these temporary projects help design ideas being tested in the real world. And then we'll discuss why pop-up projects work by highlighting some of their key benefits for communities. And then from there, we'll walk through a step-by-step overview of how how this process works. And then after that, we'll move into a project spotlight with a conversation with one of our past partners, Amanda August, and we'll share a real-world example of this pop-up project. And we'll hear some questions and answers about the project from Amanda and I. And then we'll wrap up with next steps on how you can get started if you're interested in bringing a project like this into your community. And we'll close with a Q&A and some resources to help you continue in this process if you're interested. So our overall goal for today is to help leave you with a clear understanding of what pop-up demonstrations are and how they can benefit your community, as well as how you can work with us to create one. And then we'll go into meet the team slide. So I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Alex McClellan, and I'm a graduate research fellow working through the Institute for Public Administration, and I'm a graduate student at University of Delaware as well. And I'll pass it off to you, Matt.
All right, thanks, Alec. So my name is Matt Harris. I'm the principal investigator here for the Living Labs program. I work at the University of Delaware in the Institute for Public Administration. Another hat that I wear here is working in our GAP program, and I'm sure that I've crossed paths with many of you in that program as well. So just thanks for joining us. And now I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Anna Wick.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Anna Wick. I am an associate professor of landscape architecture in the Department of Plant and Soil Sciences. And I have been involved in Living Labs for a couple of years now and look forward to talking with you about this. And I'm going to pass it off to Nina David.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nina David. I am an associate professor in the Biden School of Public Policy and Administration here at the University of Delaware, along with a faculty colleague. I started Living Lab several years ago, so I've been part of this team for a long time. So it's good to still be here. And I guess I'm passing it on to Paul.
Hey everyone, Paul Moser. I'm an engineer with Delaware Department of Transportation, Active Transportation and Community Connection section. We manage a lot of the cycling, walking, urban streetscape projects around the state. And one of the things we do is manage this program with the University of Delaware.
And hi, everyone. My name is Colin Willard. I'm an assistant policy scientist at the University of Delaware's Institute for Public Administration. I work with Matt on a variety of different transportation, land use, infrastructure projects, various technical assistance projects here at the university. So happy to be here. And I will pass it back over to keep the presentation going.
Awesome. So I'm going to start by sharing a little bit about who we are and what we do at Living Labs. So we are a research collaborative that works to catalyze community-driven active transportation pop-up demonstrations across Delaware. And when we say active transportation, we're referring to ways of getting around that involve physical activity or mobility devices such as bikes or usage of electric scooters. And these modes of travel help promote health, reduce emissions, and help create more connected and people-focused communities. And our projects test the viability of long-term built environment improvements. And when we're referring to built environment, we're referring to the physical spaces that shape how we live, move, and this includes things such as streets, sidewalks, and parks. So our overall mission is to co-create pop-up demonstrations that reimagine these spaces to be more people-centered through data collection and usage, design, and community partnerships. And the research collaborative here includes 3 key partners. So the Institute for Public Administration within the Biden School, the Department of Landscape Architecture, and the Delaware Department of Transportation. And together we combine our strengths to create meaningful data-informed demonstrations that we hope help communities envision safer and more vibrant public spaces. And here are some of our services or what we do. And this includes biking and walking facilities that improve accessibility and safety for people who may be moving without a car. And then we also have traffic calming strategies that work to reduce vehicle speeds and therefore enhancing public safety, as well as we do public outreach initiatives that ensure local voices are heard in every project that we do, and landscaping and placemaking efforts that add elements such as planters to spaces to make them feel more welcoming and friendly. And then finally, we do road diets and safe route initiatives that redesign streets to prioritize people walking, biking, using scooters, however they choose to travel. That may not be a car. And then altogether, this collaborative approach blends research, design, and community engagement to test real-world solutions that can shape Delaware's future public spaces. And now I will pass it off to Anna so she can talk about the landscape architecture piece of this Living Labs group.
Great, thanks, Alex. So as I mentioned, I'm Anna Wick. I'm a registered landscape architect in Delaware and Pennsylvania, as well as a professor here at UD. And the way that the landscape architecture works with the Living Lab is by helping vision what the placemaking aspect of the intervention is going to be. So we partner with the transportation planners to really think about how to make places safer, but then also feel beautiful, aesthetic, and allow people to really engage with outside and their surroundings. What is great about this is that we can help visualize both short and long-term interventions. And so we can show you what this short-term intervention is going to look like and feel like for the immediate needs, and then also create documentation that you could then use to leverage to get additional grant funding down the line, get community buy-in and public buy-in. So it's a really great opportunity to have your ideas brought to life. We usually work with a team of students. You can see some images of a student presenting in the upper right here, and often bring our ideas into the community to have people engage with and make sure that we're really capturing what people want in their community that works alongside the ideals of best practices in traffic safety. So that's kind of what we do, from helping with community engagement all the way through visualization. And then students also like to get involved helping install things. So that's always a good time too. But I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Nina, who's going to speak about how research fits into the picture.
Yeah, hi everyone. Again, my name is Nina David, and I'm associate professor in the Biden School. I would say that everything that the Living Lab Research Group does, including this partnership through IPA and DelDOT, is grounded in research. And what I mean when I say that is that we are really systematic and intentional about every decision that we make, about all of the data that we collect. All of our protocols are reviewed and approved by the IRB, the Institutional Review Board here at UD, to make sure that we're really ethical in terms of how we go about collecting data. And we're also thinking about every community that we work with and the lessons that we learn in terms of broader generalizability, meaning how will the lessons learned here in this one community make sense for other communities in Delaware, maybe even in the states in the region and across the US. When we start with a project, we are basically, even as we're committing to a project, thinking a lot about background contextual data. What I mean when I say this is that we're visiting the site, we're taking photographs, we're documenting conditions on site. We're looking for background studies and reports that might have some relevance to the project that we're thinking about. We're looking for plans that are in place and plan content that relates to the spaces that we're working with. We're typically collecting census data, other data. We're trying to make maps. But then we're also looking for best practices from both the professional literature and academic literature to think about what our intervention or what our pop-up project should look like. So that's all the research we do even before we think about implementing something in a particular space or a road segment. Once we, begin to design what our pop-up is going to look like, we're very interested in stakeholder engagement. That's central to our approach. And in thinking about stakeholder engagement, community engagement, and feedback, there are typically, surveys that we use before we install our pop-up or on-site demonstration to get a sense of what people think about the status quo. What do folks think about the space as it is? What are the problems they see? What are their perceptions and attitudes towards that space? And then once we install, we also go back and typically maybe do a survey again to get a sense of the pre-post comparison, right? So what do folks feel about that space now that we've implemented some changes to it? Our surveys, we have the ability to disseminate them online as hard copies. So we're big on meeting people where they are. So we try to attend community events, et cetera, to collect feedback. Not just surveys, we're able to be pretty nimble. So we could do interviews. We can be pretty flexible and creative in terms of how we engage with stakeholders. We could do charrettes, workshops. We could do mapping, voting exercises, and so on. In our quest to find data, we're also able, because of our partnership with DelDOT, to access hard data, right? So this, I imagine you're thinking about traffic counts, speed data, how people actually use the spaces in which we're working. So we're hoping that all of this data collection helps us make sense of how effective our pop-up project was. And this is important because we're hoping that the temporary demonstration is going to lead eventually to some permanent changes in the built environment. And it helps for us to have evidence to support those permanent changes. And we're, of course, always looking to document our lessons learned be reflective about the projects we're engaging in so that they're applicable beyond the communities that we're serving. I'm pretty easily accessible, so if anybody has questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. And I'm passing on to the next slide.
Hey everyone. So I'm talking a little bit about sort of what these projects actually are, and they really take a lot of different shapes and forms. Typically, when we first started this program, it started with a project in Wilmington that Nina was a part of. That was a one weekend event where we shut down a lane of traffic on Union Street in Wilmington, and then converted that into sort of pedestrianized space. Um, However, as we've sort of gone on, the projects have shifted from being up for anywhere from 1 day to 2 days to 1 week to 2 weeks. And we'll talk about one later on that is more of like an interim project that we've been working with Amanda on in Wilmington. So the duration is something that we consider upfront. What are we going to do? What kind of materials are we going to be using? And as these projects develop, we've started to use more robust and sort of we'll use the term short term for thinking like paint, chalk, tape, things which can be easily removed to demonstrate an event. We had a really good one like that in Newcastle on 7th Street that we set up basically for a bike ride. That were going to be a couple thousand people. I think it was like the Two Rivers Towns or Rivertown bike ride. Very successful, very easy to remove at the end of the day. You'll see on the bottom left, the one that was done in Marshall Street in Milford. That was a 2 week project, slightly more robust materials, but still relatively easy to take down. And we just finished one in Middletown that are materials that are going to be up almost indefinitely until they come in with a permanent project, which they aim to do next year. So we adjust the timeline accordingly. We figure out what can we do. And the project scopes range anywhere from improving pedestrian crossings using sort of temporary median refuge islands in the middle, doing curb extensions or bump outs as they're called, adding crosswalks, adding delineators for two-way protected bike lanes, and even just regular traffic calming in some cases has a huge impact. Our main goal of these is to improve the experience for people walking and biking, but as you all probably know, sometimes travel speeds and driver behavior can be a big part of that. So that also factors into our decision-making process. So we use a variety of different materials and strategies and approaches that are sort of tailored to each project location. And we've covered actually a pretty broad scope of different improvements, but that's kind of an overview of what we do. And it's something that we work collaboratively with the people who are interested in the project to develop a specific pop-up for each instance. And I think I'm taking this one. Yeah. Really our main goal here is to improve the safety, whether that's real safety or perceived safety of people on a street or a road. As you guys know, living next to a dangerous street has a lot of hazards for both your health, mental health, and your perception of the space, how people get along in that area. So really slower streets and safer streets that are more pedestrianized can have a huge impact on quality of life. Anyone that lives in a project or a place where a project has had that sort of transformation can speak to it. And we try and catalyze those and make those happen to the best of our ability on a short timeline, and then connect people with the technical knowledge and resources to then chase to make that a permanent implementation if possible. We aim to, yeah. So again, the other tenets, we try and make this a very public process. Like Nina said, we like to give people solutions in a way to work with them to actually take things that may have been talked about for several years or months and give them something to catalyze that to move on to a project. We work from we do some of the design in our team here, but we coordinate with the local agency if it's on one of their roads. If it's on a DelDOT road, we coordinate with our traffic safety section and really provide the resources to navigate those complex challenges to make things like this happen in both a time efficient way, but also a very safe way. We are not just throwing things out into the road and hoping it solves the problem. We're pretty thorough about our design process and what our expectations are. It allows people to experiment with these ideas before they're made permanent. Again, I'll reference a project we just did in Middletown where the town had never really used speed bumps or speed cushions. We worked with them to really quickly implement one of these pop-up projects to then get one on the ground to see how people would respond to it and collect data on it. It was wildly successful. And now the town of Middletown is talking about okay, where are we moving next? What's the next approach? And then what are the policy implications of it? So that experimentation before you lead to something permanent can be not only helpful for the decision makers and policy makers and people in the council, but also for the public to see that the world's not going to end. And in the case of Middletown, even with their emergency services, that was as you guys probably know, sometimes people drive ambulances or fire trucks, get a little nervous about speed cushions or traffic calming. This was a great process. We've been facilitated working with their EMS staff, their fire company, and their police chief to investigate it before we installed, and then after it's been installed, following up with them to see what they saw as any issues. So really working through some of those real challenges to implementing permanent projects at the first time, this can help alleviate some of those points of tension. Very cost effective. Some of these are dirt cheap compared to going right into permanent implementation. Again, they're more for interim. They're not really designed to be left there for years and years on end. But we're getting a lot of bang for a buck out of these projects we've seen. And again, momentum and visibility, we like to take these ideas, catalyze them, help get some action on the ground, and then hopefully lead that towards the longer term vision that the community members had in mind. And the most important part is that people just get to actually experience it, rather than just committing to something with concrete and asphalt, which can be very nerve-wracking. It lets people see what it looks like, and like I said, know that the world won't end when you install a couple of these countermeasures.
Nice. Thanks, Paul. That was a great summary of what we do. So now we've talked a lot about the program, right? What we do, the goals, all of this. I'm going to walk us through this quick chart here that just really talks about like how we do it. Like what is the systematic process that Nina was kind of talking about that actually lends us to working with communities, making sure everybody's heard, and really building a project that hopefully is embraced. So we start with that. We start with this idea of identifying a challenge, right? And we kind of talked as a group about this word challenge. Really what we're talking about a specific location in your community where something feels unsafe, right? So when we say that, these are the kind of questions you could ask yourself. Are there lack of biking and walking facilities where someone might want to do that? Is there speeding that makes crossing a road feel unsafe? Is there a need for placemaking? Are you like, wow, this is like our downtown, but it doesn't feel quite right? Like, could it be more? These are the kind of questions that we want people to be thinking about when they're thinking about like that location or that roadway. So then after a community kind of like figures out where the challenge is, right? We look around and we say, well, who would our partners be? Who would we work with to kind of facilitate conversations? Who are the stakeholders in this corridor, right? Obviously, people who travel the corridor are a stakeholder, people who live along the corridor. We've done projects where there are churches who have unique needs, where there are libraries, there are schools, there are YMCAs. It all depends, right? So in this case, and I'm going to take a word that Nina just said, and I really like the word, and I think it's really important, is nimble. We can really like hone in our project and kind of like work with whatever group of stakeholders is there. But it's good that we have people to work with, a community work with. It can be a civic association, whoever. So then we're going to work through those organizations. We're going to do some data collection that can either be through the Department of Transportation, that can be in the town. It can just be visual observations, whatever the project, whatever makes sense for the project, right? We're going to do that. Then we're going to host events, community conversations. Again, we're going to work with those partners to design something that feels right in that community, that people are going to be able to attend, that is going to be accessible to them, that's going to be meeting people where they're at. This is what we want to do. We want to have those conversations. So we go to places where people are. We go to libraries, we go to farmers markets, we go to civic associations. We often don't want to create new meetings for people, right? So if we can piggyback onto existing community outreach infrastructure, that's a great fit for us. So then after we kind of talk about, and what we're going to be doing when we're having all those conversations is talking about the corridor or the location and what doesn't feel right, what the community would feel better if it changed, what they want to highlight, what they love about their community. These are all the questions that we're going to be asking. Then we're going to work with Paul and Anna to design something, right, that reflects what we've heard. We're going to share that with the community. We're going to get feedback, right? Because we may not get it right the first time. We might have to go back and tweak. There might be something that's wrong. Like Paul was just talking about, sometimes fire companies, they have concerns. We understand there's a lot of stakeholders when we're doing this work, It also depends on what kind of road we're working on. Are we working on a local road? Are we working on a state maintained road? These are all the things that we can help you navigate. So then once we kind of come to a consensus with the community and they're like, yeah, let's test that. Let's see what that feels like. Well, we're going to install it. And like Paul talked about, we're going to do that one of two ways, right? We've had projects in the past where communities come out and they're like right there with paint rollers and they're doing it. Our program has grown a little bit. So we also have the capacity to pay contractors to install improvements, depending on where the improvement is, what level of traffic management, you know, the safety concerns around people being out in the roadway. It all depends. Again, it goes back to that being nimble part. So then we're going to lay out this new design, then we're going to evaluate it. We're going to see how people feel about it, you know? And like Paul said, one of the things that, and actually I should mention this as well for the design is, you know, as part of that process, we decide kind of how long is it going to stay out for? Is this going to be 2 days? Is this going to be a week? Is it going to be 2 weeks? And then during that time, how are we going to evaluate and collect the information that Nina was talking to you about how people feel about it? You know, what's working well, what's not working well, right? And then hopefully what this lends itself to is something permanent. So it allows communities, it educates communities about things that maybe they didn't know that were available. Oh, I'm getting the thumbs up because I'm doing it. But it allows communities to see something and then advocate for that and say, hey, I didn't know that like we could get something like that. And I would like that in my community. So they can work with their legislators and their decision makers to advocate for that. Maybe it's like a Department of Transportation road, like a state maintained roadway, and you can get into some kind of process there working with Paul to get permanent improvements. We know that this all takes time. However, we're going to talk about some next steps and stuff when I introduce our project partner, Amanda, and she's going to tell you about how a project did move forward. So it's kind of really just letting people take something that, like Paul said, feels like, oh, like how could we change that? It costs so much money. It's so much work. We want to go in and make that a less difficult process, move it along quicker. It may not be exactly what a permanent looks like, but it allows people to see what we consider and what is, in like a timeline perspective, immediate change in their community. And we think that that's really important. And with that, I am really happy to introduce our project partner, Amanda August. She worked with us. Amanda is from the Jefferson Street Center in Wilmington, Delaware. She was a key partner in bringing the Boehner Boulevard Living Labs project to life. And Amanda is just an overall advocate for community-driven design and neighborhood revitalization in Northwest Wilmington, I should say. So with that, Amanda, welcome. And Amanda's going to walk us through a couple of slides talking about the project that we worked on up there. And then we're going to get into a little Q&A to dig into the details with Alex and Amanda after that. So Amanda, feel free to take it away and welcome.
Thank you. And good morning, everybody. So nice.
Good
Such a
morning.
beautiful day out. Hi, Paul. I love the waves. So yeah, thanks for the intro, Matt. My name is Amanda August, and I work with the Jefferson Street Center. So we are a small grassroots nonprofit that focuses on advancing community-driven priorities in Northwest Wilmington that promote the conditions necessary for all residents to thrive. So just to be like totally transparent, when this process sort of started, I had no idea how any of this stuff works. So I just want to be clear, like I came into this as a novice. I didn't know any of the jargon. What I did know was that as we had moved through, we learned that Boehner Boulevard, which is a corridor that connects the north side of Wilmington into downtown, was really dangerous. And so, thank you for moving the slides. So one of our goals with this pop-up demonstration, which we actually also called the interim project, you know, it's longer than 2 weeks, but it's not permanent, is we wanted to reduce traffic speeds. We wanted to improve pedestrian safety, increase mobility for multimodal users. And so that word multimodal, you know, now I'm like really comfortable with transportation talk. And so I say it all the time and I forget that like not everybody knows what that is, but that's really to encapsulate all the different ways that people travel. So it's not just cars, it's not just bicycles, but like people were talking about scooters, talking about hoverboards, talking about walking, running, wheelchairs, I think was mentioned in the chat. So all of these are included in multimodal. And also to enhance the neighborhood aesthetic. So you can see on that graph on the right side, that is the corridor that we focused on of Banner Boulevard. The top where it's bright orange. So this is a crash heat map. So these are where it's brighter, that's where all the crashes happened, hits with where vehicles hit pedestrians. Some were fatal, some were not. And so we knew that this was a big issue since Banner Boulevard, was a 4-lane road moving through a residential neighborhood that was marked as 25 miles per hour. And most people did not go 25 miles per hour. So what we really focused on with the installation was something called a road diet. And a road diet is where you reduce the amount of lanes on a road to slow down traffic. We also installed the first protected bike lane in the city of Wilmington from Concord Avenue down to 18th Street. And there was just really a lot of clear evidence for the need of safer streets. And so one of the pieces of the evidence that I learned about much later that I'll also talk about is all of the plans that supported this project. And I didn't know about these plans before I had started moving into this process, but there's our organizational plan. We are a blueprint community. And so all of our work is resident driven. And so we utilized our blueprint plan, but also there are several Wilmington plans. There's a Wilmington bike plan, a Wilmington comprehensive plan. And then there's also the WilMAPCO Safe Streets plan. And then the United States Department of Transportation strategic plan. So all of these plans really funneled into the need for creating a safer Banner Boulevard. You can go to the next slide. So I love this slide. This really, breaks down multiple years of this process into one slide, which is sort of crazy to see. But this whole conversation started, I started with Jefferson Street Center in 2021, and that was also when the event and amazing, community connector Open Street started. And so we were able to become a location on Banner Boulevard for the first Open Streets event. And that's actually where I learned about Living Labs, the University of Delaware Living Labs. And there was a graduate intern there who was collecting information from people who were attending the event. So we really worked to leverage this event. It was also right after COVID, and people were super excited to get out. And we collected so much information from residents from that event. So after that happened, we were just like, what do we do with this information? And I didn't know. So Matt and his team, Matt wasn't with Living Labs yet, but the Living Labs team worked with us, Paul worked with us, and we really worked to take that information and figure out okay, how do we move forward and work with the community to implement some of this feedback? So a lot of the feedback was focused on slowing down cars, increasing access for bikers, increasing safety for pedestrians, and just again, supporting that neighborhood feel. So over time, we ended up hosting, I think it was 7 workshops that were community driven, community led, and we helped facilitate it. And we had them at different locations. A lot of them we did host at Hanover Church, who we partner with at 18th and Baynard. And we really kind of it's almost like a listening tour in the beginning. We reviewed the information that we collected at Open Streets, and we shared that with the community, had a couple workshops where we heard more feedback. And Paul did an amazing job with really taking that feedback and distilling it down and providing different design samples for the community to review. And we really just worked hard to continue to stay engaged, to stay communicative, to host follow-up workshops, and be really transparent about, we know that you really want this specific thing on the street. This is why it can or cannot happen. And then also communicating, with the city of Wilmington, and making sure it's also kosher with DelDOT, and making sure that everything was able to kind of work together. So, yeah, after all of that, we continue to have workshops, and through our partnerships, and I'll talk a little bit more about partnerships in the Q&A, but we were able to acquire funding through, I think, a non-traditional source, and we were able to implement the interim project on Baynard Boulevard. So we were able to reduce the lanes and install a road diet. And that bottom center picture is the bike lane that was installed, and it snowed right after. And then we were also able to put in bike barriers. So now we're at this point where the project has been, I think, on the ground for, has it been 2 years at this point? A little less. And we are looking at a permanent repavement and installation in 2026. So, and I think.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Amanda. That was a great overview of the project, and I've seen it in person and it looks great. So the first question that I wanted to ask you, which you covered a little bit, but why Baynard Boulevard? I know there's so many projects that probably Wilmington could benefit from in terms of pop-up demonstrations. So why Baynard Boulevard, and what was your experience like working with Living Labs on this specific project?
Yeah, so our work is in Northwest Wilmington, and Baynard Boulevard is in our service area. And so partnering with Open Streets was really such a huge step in figuring out why Baynard Boulevard. You know, I had mentioned that Living Labs was at Open Streets, and we were able to collect that resident feedback. And not that you need a huge event, you know, to collect resident feedback, but I definitely think having some type of community engagement event can be really, really helpful in just, you know, increasing that participation. Couple other reasons, you know, just building that cross the street connection between the neighborhoods. Coming in as the first staff person with JSC in 2021, and Open Streets happening that same year, I was still in my own listening tour of figuring out, like, who are we working with? Who are we serving? Like, what is the landscape, you know, in this area? And the neighborhoods are strong. And they also, I think because of COVID exacerbated it, they weren't necessarily talking with each other across Baynard and really engaging. And so this was a huge step forward in that direction, and working with the civic associations and really, you know, working to engage them, I think has improved. I've heard from residents that has improved a lot over time. The other piece, you know, the multiple plans that I had mentioned earlier. And then additionally, you know, Baynard really connects a lot of community assets, not just like north side to downtown, but there's a ton of schools in the area. There are churches and faith-based organizations. There are a lot of small businesses. There's a hospital right across the bridge. There's, you know, Brandywine Park. And then it's also just like a connector to downtown. So those were some really big reasons for focusing on Baynard. And in regard to Living Labs, I mean, Living Labs has been part of the process the entire time. And it has been a long process, and we've been so appreciative of that participation and support. You know, in addition to collecting pre-installation surveys, they also supported and created post-installation surveys and really worked to put out those engagement efforts, you know, doing social media pushes, and we push those out too, by making lawn signs. And we were able to collect a lot of feedback from residents after the installation had been put in. They created a lot of the presentations in partnership with Paul, with DelDOT, and with us, and really just supporting with like connecting with partners and different types of funders and letters of support from the neighborhood. So truly like a comprehensive support in the process.
Awesome, thank you. And I know you mentioned in your answer some work with civic associations and other partners that you got funding from, as well as you've worked with us. So can you tell us a bit more about the project partners, and then what do you think made these partnerships so successful?
Yeah. So I think that, developing the partnerships, it was not like a set group of partnerships from the beginning. It definitely had evolved over time. And, I think I heard the word nimble, which was a really good descriptor for this process, because again, as somebody who had never done any of this kind of work before, it felt very nimble to me. And I just was on my toes the whole time. And, but I think what really truly made it impactful were the partnerships. So we did partner with Urban Bike Project, which is a local organization in the city of Wilmington that has programming that directly provides bicycles to all different members of the community. And I think it's really important to ensure, that type of representation, considering that in Wilmington, 20% of residents, and most of them are in the 19802 area that we serve, do not have vehicles. So it's important to have that type of, organization who provides programming or provides support to different community members. We also partner with ZELDOT, with Living Labs, and as students through the landscape architecture program were just fantastic, and honestly really provided insight and ideas to different ways of approaching development along the corridor that I hadn't thought about, and I think that some residents maybe hadn't thought about. So that was a very unique opportunity to collaborate. We also worked really closely with the city of Wilmington, and I feel like we've built some really good relationships, with the city, and thinking about problem solving and how, to think forward with ensuring that, utilities and public services can continue for the residents. Also partnering with Open Streets and then Healthy Communities Delaware. And, last but not least, we work really closely with our local and state representatives. So a lot of it's just reaching out, hey, we're working on this project, I'd love to talk with you about it. And just having a lot of brainstorming conversations and kind of seeing what comes out and what we can produce together.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. And then I know you mentioned a little bit about the community engagement piece with the Open Streets event, but I'd love for you to tell us more about that, and then particularly how you navigated community members with differing opinions, because I know there was a lot of partners at play on this project.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think what was really important, and what is really important about doing these projects and pop-ups, is that we were sort of the organization that were the segue, right, from everything that was happening from the Delta, the city side, Living Lab side, to the community. And so really working to ensure that we were going to civic meetings, that we were talking with local churches and local schools about changes that were happening, talking with the local hospital and thinking about how we can get the information out. I think sometimes something I've noticed in this work so far is that sometimes there can be sort of a trap of well, we're having a meeting at our office and people have to come to us. And I think something that really worked for this process is we worked hard to go out to, meet the community in different locations and meet them where they're at. So we did facilitate, like I was saying, 7 workshops with DelDOT, with Living Labs, and really working to utilize those to create the design plans. We did have a few residents who, and maybe they still feel this way, hopefully not, but we did have a few residents who did not really support the implementation. I think that there's a lot of anxiety around change and concern that maybe access for them living along the boulevard would change. And so, when we had some workshops, there were definitely grievances that came out during these workshops. And it's hard. It's hard having these conversations sometimes. And I think what's really important is to ensure that people feel heard, that you are taking their feedback and their grievances and creating space to hear that and following up, with a response. And it doesn't have to be in that moment, but it can be afterwards, after you've done your due diligence and talked to who you need to talk to. And also being transparent about any barriers in the process. So I remember when we were working on the workshops, we put all of the nitty-gritty into the workshops to be transparent, with the information, whether something was going to work that the community wanted or whether it wasn't. So I think that is very, very important.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Amanda. I think that this went great. And thank you for working on the project with us. And thank you for sharing today. And we're excited to see where Baynard goes. It already looks great. And in terms of longer implementation, we're excited to see the future with that. So now we'll move on into kind of a next steps in the process.
Yeah, thanks again, Amanda, and hi everyone again. Colin Willard with the University of Delaware Institute for Public Administration. So just to kind of give you all some next steps in how you can, maybe start thinking about a project or, start working with us potentially. So in order to get started, you'll need to identify a transportation issue in your community where perhaps a demonstration project could be implemented. And there's a lot of different ways to go about this, as we kind of discussed. Projects take a variety of different forms and can kind of, take different shapes as, the community engagement and the project planning comes to fruition. So, but just to give you all some ideas on some examples and resources that can maybe help you all get started. So number one is local planning documents. Your community likely has a comprehensive plan or other types of plans that may specify some areas of concern in the transportation network. They could also reference project opportunities. And you can likely find these on either your municipality or your county's website. Another good source of projects would be our metropolitan planning organizations, or MPOs. In Delaware, we have the Dover-Kent MPO covering Kent County, and we have WMAPCO covering Newcastle County. And these agencies produce plans for various transportation improvements. And so this is also a great source, for different project opportunities. And, perhaps one of our projects could follow up in a planning effort that happens from an MPO. Some other ideas and examples, community conversations as well are important to have, so which streets and corridors do people feel unsafe on? What kind of comes up in conversation around the neighborhood that you live in, whether it's maybe at local council meetings or just in conversation, walking your dog or, bumping into each other at the grocery store, things like that. So those community conversations are obviously really important too. And we also have a number of different resources out there that can help you learn a bit more about different assessment tools out there that you can use to evaluate different areas of your community. We have project examples, we have best practice guides, and those are available on our Living Labs website under our resources page. And Alex just put links in the chat to all of these things. So feel free to check these out. You can always reach out if you have any questions, but these are just some starting points for you to start maybe thinking about some project opportunities. So then, once you've got a chance to kind of think about, what you're interested in, what the community supports, once you've essentially narrowed it down to a specific maybe intersection or corridor,
You can feel free to reach out to us and request assistance via our project request form. That's also available on our hub website. That's just an online form. There's also a downloadable copy of it as well that you can fill out, that just asks some questions about the project and where you're at up to this point. If, in advance of submitting the form, if you have questions, if you want to talk through things, we're more than happy to talk through project opportunities, provide maybe some additional input or information before, you're able to move forward. So we're more than happy to have those conversations as well. So like I said, feel free, you can reach out directly to Matt. His email's listed on the slide there. You can send him some information about what you're thinking about. You can also fill out the request form. As we discussed earlier, as Amanda was just talking about, the partnerships are really a big key for the success of these types of projects. And so just a couple things to consider, is community partnerships, whether it's nonprofit or local businesses. We talked a little bit about who owns the roadway. That's an important consideration as well. Is it a local road? Is it a DelDOT road? And if so, what are the conditions of those? Municipal support is obviously very helpful. So does the municipality have the capacity to assist with implementation? Are there maybe funds available at the local level that a municipality could contribute? These types of questions, can come up. Has the challenge been discussed previously? Is this a reoccurring topic that's been, kind of identified in planning documents? That's another consideration to make as well, as we kind of discussed on the last couple slides. And then also, community leadership support is essential as well. So thinking through, are there local council members that may be in favor of the project? Are there other elected officials, other community leaders at the nonprofit or local business level? So these are all things to think about. As mentioned, each project takes a little bit of a different form. So, the chemistry and the makeup of everything can be slightly different. So, when in doubt, feel free to ask questions. Feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to kind of help you and guide you through the process. And just to summarize, we're here to support you in creating safe, community-focused places. And so our assistance can really cover, everything from quick build project planning to community outreach and education. We have a limited budget to provide materials and some, design guidance. So, kind of thinking through what kind of materials are out there to be used. And then also, as mentioned in Nina's portion with our research component of this, evaluation tools to measure the impact. So, following up after the fact to make sure that we gather information on the viability of the project. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Matt to close us out and open us up for some questions. I know we only have a couple minutes left, but I will go ahead and keep an eye on the chat here. I do see we have a couple in, but Matt, you go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. I thought that was a great summary. And thanks, Amanda, for the Q&A. It's interesting to hear about it. Like, again, it always makes me happy to hear about that project because I feel like it's just such a good partnership. So again, we're going to do some questions right now. We have used up about the whole hour, some resources. We have the Living Labs website. I think what we're going to do is after this, we can send an email with all these links and the presentation to everyone. So not just if, I know there were more people who probably registered than attended, but we'll send that out and then you can all have that in your email. I would ask, so we talked about this as a group, what are we asking for people at the end of this webinar? And what we're asking for is for people to fill out our project request form and partner with us. We're looking for new projects. This is how we do what we do. I also want to just really compliment our team, just hearing everybody speak today. We all really care about this work. This is kind of like some people just have jobs, right? And they go to their job. I think we all really enjoy this part of our job and really enjoy working with communities. And what Colin said, I just want to reiterate, is that if you don't know exactly what you want to do, but you want to do something, reach out, right? We are not you don't have to have all the answers. We're here to, we can help you think through something. If it's a longer corridor and you don't know where you'd start, right? We can help you think through that. We want to do that. So we'll send all of this information out. But that's enough of me talking. Colin, did we have a couple questions? I don't want to click anything because I'm managing like this sharing, and I think it's gonna like go away if I click anything on my screen. So Colin,
Yeah.
like, what are the questions?
Yeah, you're fine. I'll read a couple off in the chat. So
Yes.
two relatively quicker ones. One from Randy Meredith. She asks, what is the submission deadline for projects? Is it the same each year?
So that's actually a great question. We don't really have a submission deadline. And so I would just say the sooner the better, right? We're kind of a rolling group. What depending on our workload, we might be able to take on your project. But don't feel like if it's 6 months away, you can't reach out to us. We're having this now. I would hope over the next couple of weeks we would get some ideas in. So if you have some ideas, that we would love to hear from you. But we don't have like a deadline. Like if it's not in by this date, we don't hear anything. But I would say for the good of the group over the next few weeks, right, it would be great to get some project submissions so we can start, getting some on the ground work and just starting this process all again.
Great. Yeah. So just to confirm, Randy, rolling application deadline, we can kind of consider at any point. We'll just have to kind of evaluate based on what we've got in the pipeline. Next one from Robert Rosenbaum. He asks, do project requests come from civic association or can it come from an individual resident?
It's a great question. I think so. I'll bring it back to the partners, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are not going, we cannot just go out and do something. We have to work within like the confines of like the governmental structure, right? So if you have a challenge, I would suggest, and you're a resident, and you have a council person, right? I would suggest you take it to your council person and you talk to them, right? See how they feel about it. Get that first level of support. See about that, right? That would be it. It would be very difficult for us to just work with. I mean, things can start with civic groups, but we would certainly want you to loop in the decision makers around and the partners. So it's not something we can't work through, but it's all about partnerships, as you heard about today.
Great. And then we had another one kind of on from Patricia Kelleher. She asks she's asking about a project in Dover, and they were installing a painted crosswalk, but weren't able to install because of some federal guidelines. So, Paul, she's asking if you have any insight on this and how it might relate to our work.
Patricia, are you referring to like different color design crosswalks? I think that's what you're talking about. To be honest with you, that's handled by our traffic section. And they make those determinations. At the end of the day, they make determinations and everything we do as well. The buck kind of stops with them. I know Milton has done some painted crosswalks, and I believe there's also painted crosswalks in Dover at Lockerman and State Street. So yeah, at one point in time, Federal Highways was cracking down on them. Exactly what they were going after, I think there's like a little bit of gray area in there. So if you want to, you can follow up with myself, and I'll connect you with our traffic section later to try and get you some clarity on that.
All right. So that's looks like all of the questions that we had in the chat. If anyone, I recognize it's noon now, so if anyone needs to jump off, we totally understand. But we will hang on for a couple more minutes. If anyone else has questions, you can feel free to maybe use the raise hand function down on your screen below. And if you have a question, you can feel free to raise your hand or post it in the chat, and we can kind of read through.
Looks like we have a
Yeah,
handful
I
of
see Ann
hands.
Canby. Hi.
Oh, and you're muted.
And I think you're on
Yes.
mute.
There. I'm sorry. I had several questions, but I think they all went to Cooper for some reason. Anyway, how does this, looking at these designs, connect with DelDOT's recently, I think, adopted Complete Streets program? That's one. And second, let's see where the other ones are. maybe you want to think about connecting with Smart Growth America because they do a lot of pop-up stuff too, and they might have some really good examples to help us advance all of this. Let me see what else I had here. Hold on.
Sorry about that, Anne. I saw your questions and I was like, good questions, and I didn't see they were directed to me. Sorry about that.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. That was I don't know why, just you popped up, Cooper. And then the other one is Jeff Speck, who does great, walkable cities. You all know about him. I mean, he says there are 4 things you have to make a good walkable place. It's got to be a reason to walk. It's got to be safe. It's got to be comfortable. It's got to be it's got to be interesting. And that means we have to have land use cooperating with all of this. So how do we use any of these tools and what can we do to help get the land use so it actually supports walkability?
Yeah.
That's really worth looking at, it seems to me.
Colin, I feel like you might want to take that because you have a lot of ideas.
Well, Matt, I'll take the first one because I think you mentioned the Del. Complete Streets Plan, which is actually more of like an internal document to Del. That is more directed, and this is just how it developed, is more directed at telling project managers which kind of facilities they need to include on their capital projects versus like a higher level policy that's guiding the planning and generation of projects. It's more of like a project level tactical kind of plan. So this is not something that's really I think it's mentioned in the Complete Streets plan, but it's we're not really super connected with it in that way.
That's a problem, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, some might say. This has been, in my section. So for instance, the Baynard Boulevard project, this led to then that project getting funded through the bicycle and pedestrian program. So it did lead to a systematic project development process, but that was largely just because of the size, the scope, and the opportunities available both in the program and with that project that could just seamlessly go boom, 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 boom. It was kind of a match made in heaven situation.
Right.
Now, any project manager involved in a project can definitely reach out to us to use this if they want to. However, as you probably know from your time at Del. A lot of the project managers,
that doesn't happen.
Yeah, they just get a project that's on the CTP handed to them, and then they're supposed to design it. We're a little different over in our section because we do a lot of the planning and community outreach on the front end. So we have exposure to that whole plan project development process. So it's a little bit different than, and for everyone who doesn't work at Del. I'm sorry for the shop talk, but I know Anne would be interested in this. That's sort of where the disconnect comes.
Yeah, okay, I get it. That's helpful. One other thing that I didn't ask before, DSHA has got this zoning reform initiative for creating affordable housing. This might be another possible link up between various parts of both IPA and Del. Because I mean, if they get the land use right, then the walkability becomes a lot better.
Yeah, these are great suggestions, and appreciate it. I'm very familiar with the Smart Growth America grants for demonstration projects, something we've considered and will continue considering. And I'm hoping it might be a program that they're willing to expand in coming years, given, we're losing some of the federal programs that might lead to some of these things. So definitely something we'll be keeping in mind. I think on the land use side of things, always great when our projects can integrate in with smart growth concepts and, walkable environments and things like that. I think, good example with our Baynard project is its proximity to Scout Cafe, gets people access to that site. Obviously, they were a helpful partner to have in this as well. So a lot of times those local businesses and Main Street type shops can be great partners in this. And so part of what we want to do is connect with them and, identify key areas and, those downtown kind of corridors that can be really high impact. So it can be tricky for us to do some like kind of higher level corridor type projects on, a Kirkwood Highway or 202 because of, there's just so many challenges to solve. And so oftentimes our projects are best suited for, kind of those downtown Main Street type areas where you can kind of get people, walking and cycling and other forms to, those uses. So
No, that's good. And obviously we want to focus more development into our town. So focusing that way is good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, all great comments though. We really appreciate your insight. I see another hand up. Nathan, you want to jump on here?
Yeah, thanks. Hey, a great webinar. This is a good program, and it's excited to learn about this and sort of how you build off of kind of like high social capital environments to address transportation safety and walkability and stuff. I guess like on the research side on this, as someone who's worked or advocated on these types of things for a few years, I think there's a couple things that we can look at. Like, so, like one, like what do you do in a low social capital environment, right? Like, so like the recommendations you guys are making me are great. Like if I live, like I've got a community center, so if I've got a lot of stakeholders, but a lot of the people across the state, especially the way the state has been developed, don't necessarily have like access to these kinds of resources. So I think as you guys work through this, like if you can help us look into that, I especially think about this, seeing a lot of my transit colleagues on here, right? These are people who generally can't reach out to their legislators, right? And maybe many of them do, but it is yeah, this is good for people who are connected, but it's definitely struggles on those with lack of connection. The other area, just because so much of Delaware's transportation infrastructure is governed by like homeowners associations and these kind of like quasi-governmental structures. I've been thinking through this a lot lately. We've got an issue with an HOA near a park, right? Like, and trying to get this solid transportation connection to a nearby trail has been almost impossible, and really the governance of that is just so hard to work with. So like, how does that either positively or negatively impact right, these connections to trails and other facilities? So now, good job, everyone. Thanks for this.
Yeah,
And
those
Nate,
are
I'll
great
just
comments.
throw some thoughts out there, and Matt and Colin, feel free to, or Alex or anyone, feel free to jump in. Yeah, you're totally right. These things are very great in sort of like high social capital areas where there's like a firm network of people in a civic organization. They tend to work quite well. However, if people don't like it, they can just as easily go the other direction. And we've worked in places, for instance, like Little Creek. We did a project, Little Creek, excuse me. And it was something where we're working with the mayor and a couple of people, the fire department, 8 or 9 people. And then we implement the project, and then we didn't realize that, farmers were a huge stakeholder that didn't care about anything until there was something in the road. So they brought out a bunch of their equipment and just ran over the stuff, the pedestrian mid-block island that we created to prove that it totally wouldn't work, which was actually a big success. And one thing about these, and some people would see that as a failure or like a PR nightmare. But I saw that as a success of the program, because by actually putting something out that was short term, you were able to elicit feedback from people in real time that were actually impacted by it. Nate, we've been at public workshops. You've come to one where you were one of 4 people on the attendance list for one of my projects before. So, some areas it's very hard to get people to think on the front end of these things. If nothing else, that they are able to help people to experience that in a sort of like contained short-term duration environment where we can take that feedback and respond to it in real time. So that would be my answer there. Now we're also able to work with whoever, like Matt was saying, everywhere is so different. For instance, in Middletown, we worked very closely with the mayor and the council and the staff of Middletown, because we're working in a relatively new development. Matt did some outreach because there was great opportunities to do that, but there wasn't really that same civic structure or necessarily community engagement like you'd find like in the Triangle in Wilmington, for instance. But we're totally able to work sort of with the higher level staff for a more technical implementation versus one that's community led. So we're flexible with like how we do these things. As far as like the HOAs and stuff, there's not a ton of instances where we're going to be working in like subdivisions, I don't think. It's not like we're like a traffic calming program that's putting speed bumps out in subdivisions necessarily. So yeah, we're going to work with them if it's necessary. Like, we had one person reach out about a project that's alongside 2 well-established neighborhoods that I'm fairly sure have HOAs. we'll definitely be working with the two of them. At the end of the day, we kind of work and at the discretion of whoever the decision makers are. Like, and if that's the HOA, that's the HOA. If that's the county, that's the county. And we work with them to mitigate those conflicts and work those problems out. So again, it's very case by case basis. We have to figure out the places that we're working in and how that works. Does that answer your question, kind of?
Kind of. I was more focused on like the UD research angle of this. So yeah, I'm familiar with what you have to deal with. But yeah, your examples generally are in places where right, you have access to the decision maker, and the decision maker is interested in the type of outcome you're looking at. I'm looking at kind of like the areas where maybe you just have disinterested decision makers, right? You have people that aren't terribly organized. So I think it's more just like how can you help sort of like state employees like ourselves yeah, figure out how to do this kind of work in places where the community connections aren't as like not the ones you guys describe in the built environment, but like the like connections between people are not strong. So that's really what I'm interested in, because yeah, I think like we're seeing with housing and referred to this, right? Like we've got municipalities who have been charged to do more on affordable housing, and we're starting to see that they're really struggling with this due to limited capacity. I know the city of Dover has absolutely limited capacity on many things. Yeah, it's I think we have to figure out how to do this without necessarily relying on a lot of the sort of the partners you guys listed that have to be involved to make a project under this happen. And I think that's really on the research side and less the implementation side for you guys. So, but no, good project. Yeah, I'll chat with your colleagues on Holland Glade Road. Definitely a possible Del HOA thing there. So if you have any context needed, go there.
Oh yeah, there's a Dell.HOA thing there for sure. But if you want to chat about it, give me a call.
Thanks, Nathan. Colin, did we have any more in the chat, or
don't see anything else in the chat at this point? But
any last minute questions from anyone? Like, we're
yeah,
also available, right? Like, it doesn't have to be here, you know. We realize
yeah, if anyone else has any further comments, anything they want to offer or add, you know, Matt's email is on the screen now, so you can feel free to reach out to him, and you know, we'll get back to you. And like Nathan, yeah, great input there, and you know, we should keep that conversation going, I think. So
yeah, I mean, great. If there's no more questions, we only went 15 over, which isn't so bad. Yeah, and just again, thanks everybody who hung on the whole time. And like I said, please get in your project forms, right? Even if they're like not the most fleshed out, totally cool with us, right? We can help you think through it a little bit. So with that, can everybody from the project team hang on? And then I am going to, everybody else can go if you want to go. And thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Mm-hmm.